Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meet the Founders session. And today we're happy to introduce our founders and our moderator. So we've got Natraj Kundak from the Accenture team, and I'll have Natraj introduce himself in a little while. But really, the idea of the session is to get to know your fellow Amplify partners. So we've got Arnold, who is the CEO and founder of Packetworx. We've got Prashanth, who is the CEO and founder of Agrithmix, and we have Ambika, who is the CEO and founder of FreshR. So we're really excited to kick off the session. This is part of Project Amplify, a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft to, help startups working on social impact and sustainability really scale their impact through technology and technology advisory. So, Natraj, over to you. And also
My
as a request, housekeeping request is if you're not speaking, please switch off your video. We'd be happy to have your videos on once the questions are in session. And if you could all just keep yourselves on mute, that would be great. So, Natraj, over to you, and we can get started. And you're on mute, Natraj.
So this is always no like I am on mute. I think my wife would very much like me to be also on mute all the time. Anyway, so I think okay. So good morning, all of you, and a warm welcome to this. I would say a chat with the founders of Packetworx and Agrithmix and FreshR. Um, so one of the intentions of this call is to one of them is to understand. Oh, by the way, let me give a brief introduction of me. So I lead the technology sustainability part of the activities in Accenture. So if you look at sustainability in a broad sense, it has two parts. One is how do you use technology sustainably itself, like green software or like green cloud and those kind of things, where you have the tools, but how do you use it in a way that it does not it's less power hungry and carbon friendly, etc., etc. That is one piece of it. The other piece of it is that sustainability being such a like very wide problem and with a lot of innovations happening there, we are also looking at how do we use leverage emerging technologies which are just emerging, which are slightly not in that mature state, but and plus we are also looking at how can we use some of the research, early research from Microsoft, and obviously that Azure services to blend together something which can actually help in scaling the sustainability part of it. So that part is what I focus on mostly. How do you use technology for sustainability? So having said that, so what do we do in this mix? I think as you heard Simran say earlier, so this is a joint innovation program between Microsoft, Accenture, as well as the social enterprises and deep tech startups, if we get into them. Obviously, I think you know what Microsoft brings to the table, but let me just briefly talk about what Accenture brings to the table. So one of the key things we are looking at here is that so when you look at this space, it's very vast, and Accenture by its very nature, works with multiple industry. I think hundreds of industry verticals in our day job, and because of the way we are positioned, we get access to some of the client issues across domains. So, for example, somebody doing something in healthcare, or a client asking for something in healthcare, and then you see that the same pattern of problem is also applicable, let's say, in agriculture. And we did this work earlier also, where like we used some work which was on how do you monitor pregnant women. The same technology was used for how do you grow organic vegetables. So I mean, those two don't even link at the top level, but that's what no how if you remove the layers, you will find that. So what Accenture does is that we connect all the dots. We also get away. I mean, we work with the startups, we work with social enterprises to get away slightly, upward, saying that maybe not look at tactical problems. Obviously, you need to solve something which is there right there, but also we need to look at slightly something ahead of the curve, which we did with, for example, with FreshR, something to do with no, the open network. I mean, it's may not be immediately applicable, but it also gives you a roadmap of what can happen, what is the possible future of how to use technology. Similarly, with Packetworx, we did the same thing with flood management and how do you do, some very a unique way of doing things with twins. And similarly, like also with Agrithmix, we are looking at how do do demand supply management in a fair manner with with the agriculture supply chain. So these are all not problems which are very readily available, but we work through that, and the whole idea is that Accenture, Microsoft helps to make sure that you are positioned for success in the coming quarters or years. Because so we try to look ahead of the curve and then try to see what would be the technology which can mature there, which you could use, which you are familiar with. So at least if you know the roadmap, it's like like somebody driving from Chennai to Bangalore, they can only see the 100 meters in dark. That's all is what currently the state of the technologies you can only see so far. We don't know what's going to happen next. But here we try to like at least try to like do the make the horizon slightly visible, and that's what we bring to the table. And we are actually very very happy to work with some of the very interesting problems. We are also learning quite a bit from all the founders and their deep expertise. And also that would have taken us years and years to get into, but we get accelerated learning. So learning is happening both ways. And I think that this is something which we found it to be extremely successful, and very like heartening also to see an impact on the ground being made by the social entrepreneurs, and also our bid to that. So that's that overall thing we talked about. And I think what we can do now is that so I will request Arnold from Packetworx to talk about maybe his work in this area, and also maybe briefly touch upon some of his learnings, or what uh, what he could gather from the interaction with Accenture and Microsoft, because that would also give startups what to expect going forward, because there's nothing is cast in stone. So obviously like how much we work together, how do we shape this, all depends upon our chemistry between the two startups. I mean, between the startup founders as well as the large companies like Accenture and Microsoft. So we are we can take it to any level, and it again depends upon how we get the traction, and whether there is interest to proceed further, do want to explore something, or it's okay to take exit from some of the activities much earlier. So that's how it is. And I would request Arnold to take over and talk a bit about his work. And Arnold, and in terms of time, I think I already took up 10 minutes. So what we can do is that we can schedule around maybe 10 to 15 minutes or around that time frame for each of you, and then maybe either we can take questions if somebody has right here itself, or or we can take it in the end also. So we can keep it free format, so that that there's nothing, we're not straight jacketed into what we want to do. Okay, over to you, Arnold. Arnold, you are on mute.
Thank you, Nataraj. I'll try to keep it on between 5 to 7 minutes as discussed. So
Sure.
I'll share my screen right now. Can everybody see my screen? Can everybody see my
Yeah,
screen
yeah,
now?
yeah. We can see your screen, Arnold. You can go ahead.
Okay. So Packetworx is hard tech. So we develop hardware, and at the same time we're a network operator. We're specifically addressing the Philippine market. So our main mission is to accelerate the adoption of IoT in the country. So anyway, Packetworx is we're the leading enabler for the Internet of Things in the Philippines. We're the first and only LP1 connectivity provider in the country. We do mainly two things. We design and develop easy to install and low power devices, and at the same time, we deploy and operate the network that connects these same devices, to the cloud. These two are critical in the IoT value cycle. Data from IoT devices fuels analytics and AI, which in turn allows companies to reduce cost, increase productivity, and allows new products and services. So in terms of market positioning, Packetworx is mainly device makers and IoT network provider, but at the same time we're touching the platform. We're creating platforms to make sense of the data that we're collecting for our clients. So Packetworx normally partners with enterprises that have access to large customer base. These are utility companies, telcos, real estate, and system integrators. So anyway, going specifically to the social enterprise bit, Packetworx is a social enterprise. Um, we provide free connectivity to non-commercial use. We provide IoT learning curriculum in partnership with Semtech. So we've done like 50 campuses tours, thesis consultations. We're partnered with over 25 universities and 5 technology incubators. We have our own technology hub, and this is where people can come in. It's open to the public, so anybody can who has interest in IoT can come in, consult with our engineers, and go over their projects in mind, and we help them at no cost. And lastly, we have a smart community app, and this is where we work with Microsoft and Accenture in terms of making sense of the data that we're collecting. We're specifically addressing, the two main items in the 17 SDG goals. These are the industry and innovation and infrastructure, and secondly is sustainable cities and communities. Going specifically to the project, one of the projects that we are working with Accenture and Microsoft, we're deploying flood sensors and air quality sensors all over the Philippines. And right now, and on the screen right now, we're showing the deployments in Quezon City. It's one of the cities in the National Capital Region, the Greater Metro Manila area, which is the capital of the Philippines. In conjunction with this, so we deploy low cost. Low cost meaning the cost of the devices is just like $100 each. It is powered by battery. The battery lasts between 2 to 3 years. This is the power of LP1 that is bringing to the table. So we deploy this in underneath bridges, over streams, over intersections, and this continuously in real time uplinks the data, the water level data coming from the different sensors. All of this goes to the cloud and Azure, and from there, we're feeding the data to Azure Digital Twins and working with Accenture to again make sense of the data. There's a lot of learnings to be had in this. Before working with Microsoft and Accenture, we're happy with just displaying the data, dashboarding, showing the different levels, and so on and so forth. But Digital Twins allows us to analyze relationships between different sets of data. So we have data coming from the sensors, but of course, there are other things that could be correlated with that. For example, if you have like a generator at the basement of your building, and you want to make sure that the floods, depending on the height of the flood, it might affect your generator or not. It might submerge your generator or not. By getting all of this data from the different sensors, we could give you an early warning as to when it's your generator is in danger of getting submerged. And the good thing about digital twins is it allows us to add more data and add more data sets into the whole database without really reprogramming everything from scratch. So right now, so that's what we're working with the project. Accenture and Microsoft. We're slowly integrating this to the app that is available for free. That shows you the data in real time in the Philippines. And with that, I'll end my portion. So I'm turning back the floor to Nataraj. Thank you.
Thanks, Arnold. That was short and sweet. Any questions, audience, if you have?
So I'd encourage you to either drop your questions in chat, or we can come back to them, or we can have you switch on your cameras and ask any questions to Arnold.
So okay. So a key takeaway, I think, for this work has been that I think, as Arnold was mentioning earlier, so there is a lot of data. So it's data rich, but people call it insight poor. So there are a lot of data, but how do you, make sense out of data? What is the relation between this data and other data? Can you, dynamically change the relationship? For example, like one of the things we talked about is the flood management. What happens if let's say a drain has been blocked by construction, or by, like, let's say by bottles, or any waste, etc. So those are all situations which get created on the fly in those cities which are growing very rapidly, because construction is also going on while the city is also expanding. So a normal way of, like insight generation is very difficult. So that's why twin comes in, giving you the option of, updating certain characteristics of a region, saying that okay, in this region, if the water level is 1 feet, then it's going to flood the streets. But in the other street, if it is 1 feet, nothing is going to happen, because the drains are all clear and it's all going forward. So mathematical models, it's difficult to do this, but with twins, and with all the kind of intelligence which can be dynamically input, it opens up a new whole world, and that's what I think Arnold was talking about, and that's the, the power of the twins, and and the end-to-end system which we would love to, which we have done in this case. Um,
So we've got a question from Prashanth. Would like to hear a bit more on how the digital twin helps.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was just describing a few minutes back. In the sense, like just the data is of not much use, and I was just talking to you about, that, for example, what is the status of the, the water drainage system in that specific area where, let's say, a commercial establishment is located. So you can have a lot of these attributes. Twin is basically a representation of, the entire thing of your interest in a way, where one data item impacts other data items. So when you build up the relationship, you can also dynamically update. So that's the power, no? Like, if, or else what you will get is that you will get saying, that water level at the bridge is 5 feet. No, maybe, like the rain gauge to 20 centimeter or whatever, 2 centimeter rain happened in 5 kilometers from this place. So you'll be getting those kind of discrete data. Now, a twin helps to contextualize that to your own specific business need, and that's the power of a twin. Okay. We can take up questions also in the end, and what I would request now, is I think Prashanth, if you could talk about the work you are doing with us. I mean, in Project Amplify, in the, the supply chain part of it, and the demand supply, and all the good work, you are doing, and what you see as a way forward, etc.
Sure. Thanks, Nataraj. Hi, everyone. Good morning to you. Good morning from Sri Lanka. Are you able to see my screen?
We can see, maybe, you can make it as presentation
Yeah.
mode.
Yes. Okay. Great. So, Agrithmix, we are an agri-focused digital enablement business. We are focused on the last mile agriculture. That is, essentially, we are connecting smallhold farmers with agri-businesses. If you take the South Asian region and Southeast Asian region, most of these farmers tend to supply their crops to established agri-businesses, organized agricultural buyers, and middlemen and agents, etc. Right? It's very rarely the farmers tend to produce their crops and take it to the market themselves. That there is a portion of that, but most of the farmers tend to depend on some sort of organized agricultural buyer, or middleman or agents. Our idea is to focus on digitizing this space so that the farmers also benefit, the agribusiness also benefit, and digitize the entire ecosystem, so that we bring more and more benefits to the farmers. That's what we're focused on. Uh, if you look at our objectives, we have threefold objectives. One is to provide automated workflows and data visibility for agribusinesses as well as farmers. We also focus on the transparency, because it's one key area where farmers are getting significantly affected. There is a lot of malpractices. There is a lot of pilferage in this process by middlemen and parties involved. So our focus is to provide more transparent procurement and transparent sales process for the farmers. This is one of our key pillars that we are focusing on. And finally, access to cash and credit. Most of the farmers live out of rural villages. in areas with limited access to financial infrastructure. So we focus on bringing them more instant access to cash through mobile money, through ATMs, through organized lending. So that way farmers are not affected by the limited access and have greater distribution to cash and other benefits along with that. Our products, we are focused on providing procurement solutions. So these procurement solutions are used by agribusinesses to coordinate with farmers, providing a more digital transaction process, digital profile for the farmers. We provide agri-focused ERP modules that can be integrated to any other ERP modules, any other established ERP systems. When I say agri-focused ERP modules, each crop has a specific way of handling their procurement and production process, and that's where we're focused on. And finally, we have a fintech suite of solutions when it comes to payment, APIs, and lending solutions that can be attached to our solutions to give greater benefit to the farmer and his buyer. Our product traction in Sri Lanka, we are in the last 2 years we have got more than 90,000 farmers in our platforms. We have more than 1,500 agents. We are working between the farmers, buying from the farmers and the agribusinesses using our applications. We got 550,000 plus transactions happening through our applications on a monthly basis, and the overall GMV, overall crops being bought and sold through our platform in Sri Lanka is close to $50 million annually. We were also part of Microsoft Amplify startup Highway to 100 program, and we emerged as winners in 2020. And we're also working with GSMA UK aid as well as Australian aid in order to digitize this entire ecosystem. If you look at the impact we bring to the society, 80% of the smallholder farmers come from rural villages. As I said, they have significant challenges on their own with limited access to technology, limited access to banking infrastructures, etc. So we are trying to resolve those problems. Almost 65% of the smallholder agri farmers and agriculture workers, especially in Sri Lanka, are women. And we are able to specifically solve problems related to them. And these are areas that we are working with Microsoft and Accenture to resolve, to give greater benefits to the farming community. Increased access to credit at reasonable interest rate, and overall greater transparency. And all in all, we are able to bring technology to the grassroots, where there is limited network, limited other infrastructure facilities. We are able to provide them technology-based solutions to improve their livelihood. Our engagement with Accenture again is focused on this particular area. Accenture gave us ideas and openings into areas that we previously did not really think about, especially on what Nataraj spoke on, is on digital twins for our supply chain, giving us instant access to what's happening on different various routes and various divisions that we are operating on, and giving significant insights on that space, as well as providing advisory and areas that we can benefit for farmers. We are working with Accenture very closely on implementing such solutions, and we are in the process of rolling out. So this engagement has been very beneficial for us, and we're looking to expand from from the ideas that's given, and we are looking to take it forward from there. So that's pretty much concludes my presentation on Agrithmix. Happy to answer any question, and I'll leave it back to Nataraj to take it from here.
Thanks, Prashanth. This was wonderful, and as a add-on to that, I think what Prashanth mentioned was that one of the spin-off of the work which has been done by Agrithmix, Accenture, as well as Microsoft, is that so we were able to so even given that the supply chain vagaries have increased dramatically, the demand and supply now, it varies, and it's very hard to predict what's happening where. And like some pandemic happening in some region, it will shut off the demand, or the demand increases due to some rainfall in, let's say, South America will shoot up the price of pepper, let's say, in India, something like that. So there are various factors, and it's very hard to figure out what's happening where. Similarly, similarly, what's happening is also that
if you have anything, don't record. I'm joining anyway.
So this demand supply has to also be, I think he was talking.
Nataraj, I think on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah. So I'm not okay. Sorry. So what I was saying was that Uh, One of the things which Prashant brought out was the work which he is doing with Accenture and Microsoft. And a key takeaway is that we have looked at it from a slightly different lens based upon what we are hearing from our clients. And that brought it to the equation. What we are hearing from the clients is that because there is so much of supply chain demand supply variations at the top level, and if you start propagating that to the farmers, so tomorrow let's say you say no, I need 10 tons from a farmer, and then tomorrow no, you say no, I need 2 tons. So you cannot keep doing that back and forth. So is there a fair way of distributing the demand and supply across the smallholder farmers and the supply chain, so that it's equitable and both of them, it's like a fair distribution of demand and supply across the value chain? How do you do that? That's what we explored with Agrithmics. And it may not be it may not, it may be used in the coming cycle or future. But and also we also work with them to see how do you do organic based agriculture, with Sri Lankan government having mandated it couple of I think maybe 6 months ago, but no, I think they've reversed it. But how do you do ethical sourcing? How do you do responsible sourcing? So those are all the kind of thing. And what are the hooks you need? What are the signals which can come on the ground? What do you need to tap? See, for example, like you figure out that, oh, there is a Pongal festival happening, which means no, I won't have the labor. So that can be factored in as a signal, which will actually tell the larger supply chain that you may not be able to get the required harvest, even though yield is very high. So those are all the kind of activities which we worked with Prashanth, and come out with something which would be useful as I think Agrithmix moves forward into adding more value into the supply chain. Um, any questions here to Prashanth? Okay, I think we can take it up in the end if somebody has anything. I think now, no, like I will request Ambika to talk about the work which is being done in FreshR, which is actually very interesting, and I think she will talk about it more. But at a high level, what we were very interested in, what we saw of a tremendous value, was that a lot of our clients are talking about circular economy, and one of the parts of circular economy is local production and consumption. So how do you do local production and consumption? How do you make sure that they can discover each other? How do you bring in trust into the ecosystem? How do you scale? So, for example, if you have a local, well, in the sense that the local production and consumption, that needs a lot of, it will be operation heavy. So, can you make it asset light? How do you make it asset light? What are the things which are happening in the e-commerce world which might impact the way the buying and selling, or the digital hub kind of activity is being done? So we worked on that with Agrithmix, sorry, with FreshR, and then we have come out with something which might be a bit futuristic, but it will be something which can give FreshR. I was telling you earlier, that maybe beyond the horizon kind of look to see what's happening, and these are the signals we are actually picking up from our clients too, because that as I was telling you earlier, because of the way we are structured and because where we sit, we are fortunate enough to get access to cross domain signals which we have factored in and fed it back to the relevant startups as something which which might be very become very important in future. So that's what it is, and I think I will now request Ambika to talk about FreshR and all the good things which FreshR is doing. Over to you, Ambika.
Thank you. Thanks, Natraj. Thank you for having me here. What I'll do is I'll actually, instead of sharing a presentation, I'll share my website because we revamped it recently. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see this.
Okay, so briefly I'll introduce FreshR and then talk about how we are looking at technology. Right, we are building India's first one-stop shop for fish and meat products, but for fish and meat businesses. So we are not a B2C company; we are a B2B company, and we are really looking at building a commerce platform where at the back end we have farmers and producers as well as aggregators of produce, and on the front end, we have stockists, distributors, institutional buyers, Horeca, etc. Right, and the idea is really that FreshR operates in the middle of that value chain and provides services to both sides of the value chain. Right. And to do that, we are doing a bunch of things. One, of course, is that we want to solve for very old-fashioned kind of trading businesses, and a lot of trust deficit exists around. Is my fish freshly caught when I'm ordering 10 tons worth of produce? Am I getting access to a variety of suppliers, or am I stuck with my legacy supplier? Is the packaging standards, the ice standards being maintained, or are preservatives getting piled onto my produce? And then, of course, because it's a perishable commodity, which has a nationwide demand, logistics and distribution plays a very, very important part, right? So FreshR operates across these categories roughly, but some of our biggest categories are freshwater fish, essentially, because that is 90% of India's domestic demand. And the way we are looking at technology really is, we have obviously physical infrastructure in terms of our sorting grading centers, fulfillment centers, our logistics vehicles. But what we want to do is we want to use technology to give a great user experience to our buyers and our sellers. So typically what happens is in B2B traditional businesses, if any company does start using technology, it's more focused towards streamlining the supply chain. And while that is important to streamline the supply chain and bring about those incremental efficiencies, the fact also is that we personally believe nobody has made enough effort in terms of thinking about it as from a user experience point of view. It shouldn't be technology just for internal processes, but also to help in aiding discovery for our buyers, allowing our suppliers to do business development on our platform, looking at very basic sort of traceability modules that we can build, so that our buyers, for example, get to know what is the time at which the catch is getting loaded. So can we have timestamps, photos, videos, image recognition software to do grading, sorting, and then of course look at your tracking and traceability, and then have a rejection policy on the basis of those sort of objective technology driven parameters, right? So that is the way we are approaching it. There are a bunch of existing technologies that we can aggregate to operate on, sort of build this out. We don't have to build everything from scratch, but our sort of thesis is that we like to believe that we have focused on really identifying the use case very accurately, and then figuring out technology to solve for those use cases. Neither of the founders come from a technology background, so this is where sort of the Project Amplify team also helped us greatly in terms of sort of the problem and how to think about the solutions. Even today, as we implement the product, our teams are sort of regularly in touch with the Project Amplify teams on everything, ranging from hiring problems, how do we make our JDs, whom do we reach out to hire, are we looking at integrations correctly, are there better options in the market? So Project Amplify has been a sort of a very practical soundboard for us as we've been building out our product. And like very often I'm asked that, without being from a technology background, how have you guys managed to build out what you're building? And I think to some extent the credit goes to the Project Amplify team. So that's really what the journey has been. We are now rolling out the tech in three phases. We are looking at the first phase, which is our listings platform, which is getting rolled out as we speak, which will be followed with online ordering, and then finally with allowing our users to track and trace their orders and have rejection policy and a returns policy in place, which is unheard of for the perishables B2B space. I mean, typically what you hear about rejections and returns is non-perishable commodities, B2C, small ticket volumes, right? Those kind of things. But we are saying that doesn't matter even if you've placed whatever $10,000 order, and you're not happy with your product, we can actually do a reverse pickup and liquidate it elsewhere, despite it being perishable. So that's how sort of we are implementing this. So that's it from my end, Natraj. Happy to take any questions at this stage.
Thanks, Ambika. I think it was very helpful. And I think, as Ambika was mentioning earlier, so one of the things we do as part of this program is design thinking activity. So before we actually jump into any of the tactical issues or something which is a roadblock for the specific social enterprise or a startup, we spend I think more time in understanding where are they coming from. Is there anything which we are seeing from the market which could actually add value? Is there something where where we could also like position the social enterprise or the startup in our with our own clients? So I mean, like as I was saying earlier, because of our access to the very large industry set, there are no possible operations and possible openings and possible ways of collaboration beyond Amplify also. So that's what also we look at, and what we also do is that as part of design thinking activity, we also see that okay, whatever you're doing is good, but this is a mega trend which is happening, which nobody understands now. How is it going to impact? For example, we were talking, I think in the specific case of FreshR, we were looking at open network for digital commerce. So which is like it's what is it picking up, and I think in UK, then in the US, and even in India, what's happening is that people are going from a what do you call a provider centric model to something which is now more democratic, where like buyers and sellers can discover each other without for example an Amazon being in the middle. So that is coming up. So how does it impact? Maybe it does not impact let's say fresher in the I mean, now, but it might also help them to think through that and see how is that they structure whatever they are doing now, so that that it becomes easy for them to a transition or even bring part of it into their existing ecosystem. So that way, that there are no surprises and there is no blind side to the work which is being done. So those are the kind of things which we bring as part of this program. One is like looking ahead. Second is design thinking. Third thing is also like trying to fit it into the larger problem we are seeing with our clients, so that we can position it beyond, maybe elevate whatever is being done into something. See, for example, what Ambika, whatever she has done, we are positioning it as a circular economy, and the model is like very useful in many other areas where you're trying to reduce the distance between production and consumption. I was talking about this earlier. So there are a lot of innovations which can happen in that space. So it will be beyond what like the current problem, but useful to many people. Even like it will be useful to people who are across. Maybe other startups can also look at it through these kind of talks. Maybe some idea you may pick up. Oh, that looks very nice in that they have done it this way. Maybe I can pick up some ideas from there, or maybe that's something which I never knew, and that's a way to look at it. So that's the power of networking and the power of aha moment, which we try to bring into this. Overall, in a nutshell, I think what we are trying to do is that if you have a point A which you start off, and if you're saying that my point B is my destination, normally we don't go in a straight line. So we branch off from point A to point like B, C, D, E, F. Then from there we again branch off. So it, I mean, like you can go back and then build up a, what do you call, you can go back and connect the dots. But what we are saying is that it's not a straight line, and those are the places where you have to make a decision. That's where we bring in our, I mean, expertise along with Microsoft research, as well as the Azure expertise, to say maybe you should do this way, but you can also do the other way also. But I think if you do this way, this will be much better because of A, B, and C. So that is the kind of involvement and the inputs which we give to this. I think Ambika has answered the questions of.
I think I've got two, three questions. Should I take them?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so there was a question around what mechanism do you use to keep the meat fresh for more than a week? Like, is it frozen or dry? So typically, the India market is a fresh market. It's a wet market. If you try and keep the meat for too long using a variety of either freezing or dehydration techniques, it will not sell. So our job really becomes to sort of synchronize the identification of the farmer or the pond, and then coordinating the loading, sorting, grading, icing, packing, and dispatch and transportation processes in a real time basis, such that it reaches the destination, the buyer, anything between 12 to 48 hours. And during that time, the idea is that the produce should either be kept with, industry standard 1:1 fish to ice ratio, or it should be transported in refrigerated containers, either of the two or both preferably. But it's really about, making sure that it's at best chilled and not frozen or dehydrated, because if it's frozen or dehydrated, it won't sell. So that's sort of a constraint in the India market. Um, there was a question around what tools we've used to implement the marketplace. I just answered that in the chat box. But the question around, do you have um, plans for B2C? What will the main challenge be? Yeah, so, to be very honest, again, something very specific around the India market is that consumers have a very traditional approach for consuming meat. They like to go to their traditional fishmonger and, inspect the fish, look at the gills. The fish should be whole, like it shouldn't be cut, cleaned, packed before the customer sees the whole fish, right? So because consumers have this obsession with freshness and whole fish, B2C, organized B2C has always been a very small percentage of the India market. I mean, even if we combine all the direct to consumer startups like Licious and Fresh to Home, plus we add modern trade retailers into that, it's less than 5% of the India market. 95% of India's consumption happens through the fishmonger sitting on the roadside or the butcher stall, right? And while there might be hygiene issues around that, the reality is that the Indian consumer prefers that over a hygienic pre-cut kind of meat, right? So that makes it hard to crack the B2C market. Um, and that is the reason why we decided to focus on B2B, because it's easier to achieve scale in B2B. In B2C, the customer acquisition costs will be very, very high, and even after taking all that trouble, you'll not be able to scale your business. In terms of what is the cost of implementing the technology stack, and why we use certain tech stack. So, this sort of depends on the capabilities of the team that you have. In fact, we had this session with Vinayak of Microsoft, where he helped us think through what are the pros and cons of the different tech stacks, and depending upon your use case, something will be a little better than something else. But the reality is, at the end of the day, you have to hire engineers who, happen to have those skill sets, right, and come at an affordable cost. So the way we did it is that we had an internal product manager who was leading it, and we had an outsourced team that was actually doing the coding. Now we are sort of building the team in house in terms of the actual development. Um, but yeah, it's costly. I mean, while I was brainstorming with Natraj and the Project Amplify team, I was constantly raising money on the side, because I knew that, without raising capital, it's going to be a real challenge to pull this off, right? Simply because, not because we're implementing anything very complex, but because just engineering talent has become ridiculously expensive in India. So we had to raise capital. So that's I mean, I don't want to get into details of exactly what the cost is, because the cost can vary. I mean, you can get something made in 10 lakh rupees also, and you can spend 1 crore also on it. So it really depends on your use case. But on an average, you're going to have to raise capital or either arrange money from somewhere to pull it off. So that's a bit of a constraint with building these kind of technology stacks. Maybe 5 years ago it wasn't so expensive, but today, thanks to the talent costs, it is.
No, I think that's a very good segue because as part of Amplify, one of the things which we advocate also is that when we are doing the design thinking or discovering what needs to be done, we recommend using the Microsoft Power Platform. So it's a no-code platform, and no, it gives you a lot of capabilities. So, for example, something which you eventually may want to do in Android or any other React, I mean, whatever it is, but getting to have a prototype or a prototype done very quickly, understanding how it works, what are the feedback, maybe not junk it and redo it again. So that the Power Platform is a very good tool to give you on the fly and accelerate this kind of discovery of how should it look like, what should be the interaction, how should the system look like, etc., etc. So we we lean heavily in the initial phases of the projects with power tools. Sometimes what happens is that people use power tools also in their final products and projects. Sometimes they may use part of it, but the idea is that with those kind of power tools from Microsoft Azure, it gives you a way of iterating things very quickly and also quite inexpensively. So that you can that's something which you will get as part of this program Amplify, both
There's
from
I think one
Microsoft
more
as well as from
question.
Accenture.
There's one more question. Should I take it, Simran?
Please go ahead. Actually, before you take that question, I just wanted to say that some of our participants don't have access to the chat. So if you are one of those participants, you can raise your hand using the feature in case you want to ask a question. We encourage you all to come in and ask questions, as well as Ambika, Arnold, Prashanth. If you have questions for each other, because this is Meet the Founders interview for founders like yourselves as well. So, feel free to kind of jump in and ask those questions.
I'll
Go
just
ahead.
take this seafood question. Yeah, no. So because the Indian market is very obsessed with fresh produce, it's very hard for imported products to sort of flood the market and create a competition or a glut, because it just won't fly. I mean, the frozen product will not fly in the local retail markets. The Chinese companies would be a problem if I was an exporter of produce from India to, let's say, the Middle East or Europe or the US or something. Then, of course, I mean, obviously, it would have been very, very competitive. But in the Indian market, we have a layer of protection because our consumers don't like frozen or processed or dehydrated products.
I think there is a question which I think somebody has, I mean, Emmanuel has asked, which talks about the do we want to use AWS or Azure, etc. You want to take it up, Simran? Or I can give you an answer. I think she has jumped to the other meeting. So what we typically do is okay. What we typically do is that I think, as you rightly said, no, that there are credits given by there are Azure credits given. That actually could be used for your initial prototypes, initial work, or maybe you're exploring something. You can do this, and then finally, when you actually deploy, you could do maybe a hybrid version of whatever works for you. So the idea is that this program is all about using Azure services to help you with shortening the development and then innovation lifecycle. So depending on, again, it's not that this is forced, but you could use some of these things to accelerate, and then finally, like when you go for scaling, or you could either keep it. Some of them actually keep, let's say 80% of it, and maybe 20% is given. I mean, just give an example. Like they may even go with Android-based mobile applications for whatever, and they would have done it using Power Apps earlier, but then they would have shifted to Android. But then in the back end, it will all be Azure services. So there's no hard and fast answer for this, but you get access to the Azure credits so that that you can actually go and play around with it, innovate, and then move forward. So Simran, I think we have answered all the questions. I think we are right on time, and we have 9 more minutes. And
Sure.
um, what if there are no more questions? What I think is that no that. So it was actually very interesting, and hopefully, the takeaway is that one of the questions we keep getting asked is that it's very clear what we get out of the program from Microsoft side, because Azure credits, access to Azure services, and then there is something like Accenture will give you innovation services. So that that part is what you got a feel of today by looking at what is that we bring to the table with these with the three startup founders, and that will also give you, some insights into what can be done with Accenture Innovation Services. So hopefully, that if you have any questions, I think feel free to connect with Simran, and then we will be happy to answer that maybe later also if you have any questions.
Back to you.
Thanks, Prashant. Thanks, Ambika. Thanks, Arnold, and thanks, Imran, for setting up this call. Hopefully, everybody found this to be of worth, and you spent a good 1 hour today morning, here, and hopefully it actually helps you to scale faster and impact the people, who matters. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Natraj.
Natraj. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Before we leave, I just wanted to quickly, also bring the attention that we've got a startup from the Philippines, we've got a startup from Sri Lanka, and we've got a startup from India. So really covering the regional diversity here, and hopefully, the use cases that were presented to you today through our wonderful founders and the amazing work that they do, did help bring some perspective as to one, how Project Amplify can help, and two, potentially, if you're interested in the work that Packetworx is doing, or FreshR is doing, or Agrithmix is doing, that is also a large part of the agenda, is really to connect founders and get them, to also help each other through networks, etc. So, if this is something that's exciting to you, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to connect founders, or you have access to our WhatsApp chat as well. So you can give us a shout out there as well, and we'd be happy to make the connects. So thank you everyone for your time. I have posted a feedback form for the audience. If you could take a minute of your time to fill that out, it'll help us as well curate the session better. But big thank you to Natraj for
Thank
moderating,
you.
and Ambika, Arnold, and Prashanth, you all are rock stars. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye.
you. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
morning.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.